am, and I just want to make this clear. One, I don't do politics. I don't follow religion or anything that requires a title. And I absolutely do not subscribe to any system or anything that thrives on separating people. It is sad, honestly. Everywhere you look, it is red versus blue. It's this belief versus that one. And somehow everyone forgot one simple truth. We are all human. Like, what happened to love? What happened to just caring about one another? When did being different become a threat instead of something beautiful like it should be? I know I am highly spiritual. I live by energy. I live by intuition and alignment. But that doesn't make me better than anyone else, and it doesn't make anyone else better than me. It just means that we've seen how these systems, politics, religion, even parts of spirituality, can be used to control, to divide, and to put us in these little boxes. And I want no part of that. I don't want to be labeled in anything, not in relationships, not in anywhere. I don't want to be told how to think, how to vote, how to pray, or how to exist. We are meant to be free thinkers. We are meant to grow. We are meant to change, to see each other fully, not through the lens of party lines or spiritual hierarchies, but through truth, through humanity. So if you're wondering where I stand, it's right here. I stand with love, I stand with people, and I stand with peace.
When you're out of your body, you see time for what it really is. You experience past, present, and potential futures. Your soul can create anything that it desires to create. The universe is not dictating that soul. That soul is the consciousness which is dictating the universe and creation all around it. This particular universe, this construct, was created to experience that which we are not on the other side. There is a base level reality there. Your soul, your body is the ultimate piece of technology that if you command it, your cells will start to express themselves in that way. As you're a child, you're already naturally tuned into where you come from, home. And since it's already there when you're younger, and if it's not shut down due to upbringing and parenting, the education system, and suppressing that, it's very much always present, what people consider home. And this is something to really, I feel it's very important to understand, because a lot of people are seeking truth. They're seeking a truth. And just like your soul has a spark that will create things within your life, the same with truth. There's a foundation to truth. And that's what a lot of people are seeking. And through all of this, you could say the number one truth is returning back to your home again, to remember that, because that's your divinity of where you've come from, where you will always return back to. And it is your true state. And when you remember that in love, then you could start to bring that here. When they call about heaven coming to earth, you could literally bring that here within your reality. So yeah, to the best of your ability anyways, with everything that's, all the other stuff that's here as well. So,
Could you even go as far as saying that death actually, we've got it a bit backwards by ways of actually it ought to be celebrated to some degree, because you're actually returning home to your family.
Exactly. So people think of death now where it's something sad. And actually, anytime when I hear somebody go through a near-death experience, or they have the first out-of-body experience, or even if someone close to them has died, that is a very exciting thing for me, because I could directly tap into that individual and make them remember where they come from. And that is part of the mission of what I'm doing. Part of the work that I'm doing is to not allow people, but to trigger people to remember that. Because when someone's passing or they die, you can ask them the simple question, well, where do you think they went to? Or if they were about to die, if you were to die, where do you think you would have gone to? And then they'll start asking, saying, oh, I think this and I think this. I think I will go here. And I say, stop thinking for a moment. Like, just tune into what you feel would happen to you. And automatically what happens, even without coming out of the body, you could tune that individual back to its original state, back to its home of remembering. Because then that individual will start thinking of its own version of heaven. Because on the other side, everybody has their version of heaven. And typically, if you are in the heart of unconditional love, here because your heart is a toroidal field, electromagnetic field. And when that is activated, you could say it holds the power of the sun, what is considered a stargate. And that could bring through your heaven here, and you use your brain as just what it's used for, decoding things. But your heart is the thing that creates everything, pretty much. And your heart could create the most hellish experiences, but also ones in unconditional love, too, depending if you step out of it. So it's safe to leave your body. And this is part of the fear stuff that's very important to overcome. This is why people, when they have out of body experiences, they, based off of if they have not worked on their fears, or you could say have control over their field, they will typically experience a lot of nefarious things, subconscious things that have been there in the background for many, many years. And it's all projected forward for you to see. And people freak out because a lot of people don't want to face themselves. And you can never escape yourself. You always have to face it, and you have to face it fearlessly, and in a state of not being in fear. Because just over that threshold of fear is where the doors of this construct open up to you again. Quite literally, man. So, I mean, and that's coming from direct experience of being in fear for years myself, trying to access certain things, not realizing that the state of fear was putting me in this, my will of my soul was putting me in this confined space, my own prison, that I was self-manifesting and self-creating. I was like, okay. And like, I literally got to this point. I said, kill my soul if you want to. I don't care anymore, because I'm sick of this fear. And then from that point, everything just wide open.
Let's talk about alchemy, in case you've never heard of it before. Some think that it was old-timey magic or fantasy stuff, but alchemy was actually one of the earliest forms of science and spiritual study. It has been around for thousands of years, starting in ancient Egypt and then later in the Middle East and all through medieval Europe. Alchemists were people who studied how things changed. They worked with metals, plants, fire, water, trying to understand how one thing could become another. And the most famous thing that people say about alchemy is that they were trying to turn lead into gold. Now, this was not just because gold was valuable, but because it showed the biggest transformation possible. So something dull and heavy becoming so pure and radiant. But there is a twist. Most alchemists weren't just interested in metal. They believed that what they were doing in the lab also reflected their own inner transformation. So turning lead into gold, it was about turning fear into wisdom, pain into purpose, confusion into clarity. And that's why alchemy is both science and soul work. It is one of the oldest ways that humans tried to understand how to change without losing their essence. And that's still really relevant today. It is not just about turning lead into gold. That is the surface level stuff. Real alchemy is about understanding how transformation works, and on every level. Yes, it's used in chemistry, but the goal was not just metal. It was understanding how everything changes, physically, emotionally, spiritually. In ancient texts, especially from Egypt and Persia and later Europe, alchemists wrote about breaking things down, purifying them, and putting them back together to be better. That could mean metals, but it also meant the self, your ego, your pain, your beliefs. Lead into gold was part of it, but it was also code. Lead was the heavy, stuck parts of you, and gold was clarity, truth, and even enlightenment. Alchemy taught that nothing is ever destroyed. It is just changed. And if you understand the steps, you can turn your hardest experiences into power. And that is the real alchemy. It's not magic tricks. It's learning how to shift something without losing its essence. That's the important part.
Nobody sneaks up on me, kid. She with you?
This is my stalker. I turned her into an unpaid expendable gopher.
Let's talk about the process of alchemy, as it was a process and it happened in 7 steps. Step 1 was calcination, which is burning it all down. This is when your ego starts to crack. You lose that job, the relationship, your identity, and you realize that it wasn't really you. Step 2 was dissolution, melting into the mess. You stop trying to hold it together. Your beliefs, your habits, and defenses start to basically dissolve. This feels like chaos, but it's cleansing. Step 3 was separation, sorting through the rubble. You start to see what is actually you and what was never yours to carry. At this point, the truth starts to get clearer. Step 4 was conjunction, rebuilding from the real version of yourself. You reconnect with your soul, your body, your spirit. It's the beginning of wholeness. Step 5 is fermentation. You're going to let your new life rise. You're going to get insights, dreams, and flashes of inspiration. Your spirit starts coming alive again, but not in a fake, like toxic positivity way. This is your real inner fire coming out. Step 6 is distillation, refining the truth. You cut away anything that still doesn't align, and what is left is pure, it's clear, and it is strong. And step 7 is coagulation. You're embodying the gold. This is when your transformation sticks. You are no longer becoming, you just are. Now, the alchemists wrote all this down in symbols and metals and fire, but what they were really describing was you.
What I call the awakened ones, individuals who embodied Jung's concepts of shadow integration, changed not just their own lives, but revolutionized how we understand human psychology. Jung spent decades studying what mirrored the principles of shadow work in empathic individuals. Here's what he discovered that terrifies psychologists to this day. The kindest people aren't weak. They're weapons waiting to be forged. Jung's case files from his Zurich clinic reveal a disturbing pattern. Patient after patient arrived carrying the same wounds. Empaths who had been systematically destroyed by those who claimed to love them. They came with bruises they explained away, depression they blamed on themselves, and a universal tendency to apologize for existing. Jung documented what he saw across dozens of these cases. These individuals had spent their lives absorbing everyone else's pain. Alcoholic parents' rage, spouses' infidelity, family members' dysfunction. They were what I call the emotional shock absorbers of their social systems. Individuals who exemplified Jung's observations about how sensitive people often become repositories for collective psychological pain. Here's the part that made Jung's blood run cold. These empaths didn't just endure abuse, they systematized it. When Jung asked them to describe their relationships, he expected the scattered thoughts of damaged minds. What he discovered changed everything he thought he knew about empaths. These patients hadn't been broken by abuse. They had been studying it. Jung found that empaths kept detailed mental records of every person who had ever hurt them. They knew their abusers' triggers, insecurities, and deepest fears. They had mapped emotional patterns with surgical precision. They had never used this knowledge, not once, until something pushed them past their breaking point. Jung wrote about how the empath's mind operates not as a victim's diary, but as what I would call a strategist's war room, waiting for the moment of activation. If you've ever felt like people underestimate your awareness, write this in the comments. I see everything. Jung realized he wasn't treating victims. He was sitting across from what I call psychological geniuses in hiding, individuals whose capabilities reflected Jung's theories about the advanced psychological functions some people develop. These empaths' genius wasn't in creation. It was in emotional archaeology. They could excavate people's deepest wounds just by watching their micro-expressions. Jung began testing their abilities. He brought in colleagues without telling these patients anything about them. Within minutes, they could identify childhood traumas, relationship patterns, professional insecurities. Their accuracy rate was consistently above 95%. Here's what made Jung's hands shake as he wrote his notes. These empaths weren't psychic. They were simply paying attention at a level most humans never reach. What others call intuition, they called data collection. Jung started to understand something revolutionary about empaths. They don't just feel more deeply, they process emotional information faster and more accurately than anyone else. Their brains are wired for pattern recognition in human behavior. Society had taught these individuals that this gift was a curse. Every time they tried to voice what they saw, the lies, the manipulation, the hidden agendas, people called them too sensitive or overly emotional. They learned to silence themselves, to doubt their perceptions, to apologize for seeing what others couldn't. The truth doesn't disappear just because you stop speaking it. It accumulates. And in these cases, it had been accumulating for decades. Jung observed how empaths don't lose their mind from feeling too much. They lose their mind from being told their feelings are wrong. He realized these patients weren't having nervous breakdowns. They were having breakthroughs. Jung identified a consistent pattern across his empath cases. Their transformation didn't happen gradually. It happened in one explosive moment that reflected what Jung understood about shadow integration under extreme duress. The trigger was always betrayal, not just any betrayal, but betrayal by someone the empath had completely trusted and protected.
Yep,
In case after case,
that one.
Jung documented the same scenario. The empath would discover infidelity, financial betrayal, or emotional manipulation from their closest person. What made it devastating wasn't the act itself. It was the realization that they had seen the signs all along and ignored them. These patients did what empaths do. They said nothing. They absorbed the pain in silence. They blamed themselves. They tried harder to be perfect partners, children, or friends. Then came the moment that changed everything. What I call the clarity event, when the empath's pattern recognition finally overwhelmed their need to believe the best in people, embodied Jung's concepts about psychological awakening. Most people would expect empaths to cry, to scream, to fall apart. Their abusers expected that too. They were prepared for emotional chaos. What happened instead was something that terrified everyone involved. The empaths became unnaturally calm. Jung documented this as the moment when someone finally integrates their analytical capabilities with their emotional intelligence. Jung observed across multiple cases what I would describe as the most chilling psychological transformation possible. These empaths didn't attack. They didn't rage. They simply began to speak truth. They revealed everything they had observed, catalogued, and silently endured. Not with cruelty, with clinical precision, like surgeons identifying each diseased organ before removing it. This wasn't revenge. It was clarity. These empaths were finally using their gift of complete perception, not to excuse behavior, but to expose it. Jung's observations echoed the ancient wisdom that there is no fury like someone who has finally learned to trust their own perceptions. Jung realized this pattern across his cases wasn't revenge. This was what he termed shadow integration, the moment when someone stops denying the parts of themselves they were taught to hide. The empath's shadow wasn't evil. It was their suppressed intelligence, their silenced intuition, their denied strength. When they finally integrated these aspects of themselves, they became what Jung called psychologically complete. Here's what made these cases so disturbing for Jung. The transformation was permanent. These patients didn't cycle back into people-pleasing. They didn't apologize for their newfound boundaries. They didn't second-guess their perceptions anymore. They had become what Jung feared most, empaths who could no longer be manipulated. The changes didn't stop at the psychological level. Jung documented how these individuals' entire lives transformed within months. They left abusive relationships with strategic precision. They cut contact with toxic family members without emotional drama. They rebuilt their lives on their own terms. Jung observed them becoming what he called selectively empathetic, still deeply caring, but strategically protective of where that care flowed. The most disturbing part for Jung was how these transformed empaths' presence affected others. People who had once walked all over them suddenly felt nervous around them. They couldn't explain why. These empaths weren't aggressive or cruel, but everyone sensed something had fundamentally changed. Jung identified what he called the predator's instinct. Manipulative people can sense when their usual tactics won't work. They avoid integrated empaths like vampires, avoid sunlight. Jung wrote, "The awakened empath doesn't need to announce their power. Others can feel it in their bones." Comment if people started treating you differently when you found your backbone. They sensed the change before I announced it. Jung's fascination with these empath cases went beyond professional interest. He was disturbed because he recognized something in their transformation, something that mirrored his own psychological development. Jung himself was what we would now call a highly sensitive person. He understood the empath's journey from the inside. He knew the pain of seeing what others couldn't see, feeling what others wouldn't feel. These cases forced him to confront a disturbing question. What happens when empaths stop being society's emotional shock absorbers and start using their gifts strategically? Jung spent years following these transformed patients' post-integration lives. What he discovered kept him awake at night. These individuals had become extraordinarily successful. Their businesses thrived because they could read clients' real needs before they voiced them. Their new relationships were healthy because they could identify emotional predators within minutes. Their decisions were flawless because they trusted their intuitive intelligence completely. Jung realized something that made his blood run cold. These empaths hadn't become less empathetic. They had become perfectly empathetic, which meant they were also perfectly strategic. They could manipulate others as easily as they had once been manipulated. They understood human psychology at a level that made them nearly omnipotent in social situations. Here's what truly terrified Jung. These transformed empaths chose not to use this power destructively. They could have destroyed every person who had ever hurt them. Instead, they simply removed toxic people from their lives and moved on. Jung realized he had witnessed the birth of what he called the integrated empath, someone with both the sensitivity to feel everything and the wisdom to choose what deserved their energy.
There comes a point after shadow work where you stop rushing to save people. And at first, it feels wrong, like you're cold, detached, uncaring. But you're not. You're just not leaking your energy into every open wound anymore. See, when you were still bleeding, it made sense to tend to other people's wounds and other people's pain because it was familiar. And helping them felt like helping yourself. But now, you realize that some people just don't want to heal. They just want you nearby while they bleed. And that's no longer your ministry. You don't need to explain your boundaries. You don't need to prove your compassion. You don't need to stay in cycles just to be seen as loving. Your energy is sacred. Your presence is medicine. And not everyone is ready for either one of those. So, no, you're not the healer for everyone anymore. And that's not selfish. That is sovereignty.
Let's just say the construct, replace the word construct for scientifical terms as universe. So this particular universe, this construct, was created to experience that which we are not on the other side. So this is where you get the illusions of through the body only, of pain, suffering in that way, where you can imprison the physical body, can't imprison the soul. You have the illusion of birthing and creating a new soul, not necessarily how it is on the other side. So you have all of these creations here to experience the opposite of who you actually are. And with that also comes the unforeseen events. Yeah. And it wasn't necessarily supposed to be quite like this, the extremes quite like this. It was supposed to be a gradual process of forgetting to remembering, stepping back into your divinity, your love, and allowing that frequency that will create everything around you to manifest your heaven here in the earthly realm. You could say the first heaven, round one, is the first heaven out of 12 heavens within this construct. Yeah.
It's interesting. It sounds a bit like not as dark, but it almost sounds like we're in the upside down from Stranger Things. This is there's you mentioned realms, and so I think it's useful to provide the rest of our conversation context to explore the construct a little bit. You mentioned you can sub-construct for the word universe, almost one for one. Are there other universes? Are there other constructs? Where have you been in around that? And then you often talk about there being 12 different realms. I know there's a lot of questions fired at you all at once, but maybe
no, that's
all
cool.
that context could be super helpful. Yeah.
No, that's okay. So when I talk about the 12 realms within here, so this construct is universe. So you know that we have a 12 helix DNA, pretty much 13 if you really add them all together. But right now we're only using 2. Now, if you look into the information as well, we have 13 dimensional structures within the brain. And typically when people come back from a near-death experience or even an out-of-body state, you'll find that some of their, what science calls DNA, becomes more active. You get another strand turned on. Some portions of the brain, the dimensional structures in the brain turn back on as well. Because the physical body was perfectly created based off this construct design. 12, 13 being the container of the realms. And you could call them, I call them anymore 12 heavens to make it very simple. Because you have the earthly realm, what you could say is the first heaven. And the second heaven is what people call the celestial bodies above. That would be the second heaven. The third is where you're tapping into things like beings that have disappeared from this plane of reality. And you would call them, just in short, Anunnaki. And then you have the realm of Eden, which is another, you could say the fourth heaven. Then you have the cathedral heaven. You have the angelic heavens. And it goes all the way up to 13, pretty much. The 13th being the container, as I said before. And the bodies were supposed to, based off who we are and without all the suppression of everything that is on the physical body, we were naturally supposed to tap into all of these things very easily. And when you're younger, you do. And then they call it imagination or whatever, you see, and you suppress these abilities and they become dormant, pretty much. And then to go back to what you said as well with the other constructs, are there other constructs on the other side? Yeah, there's many of them, and they're all created by the will of the soul, each individual soul. So on the other side, when you're out, let's just say outside of this known universe, and you're completely out of it, there is a base level of reality there. And another way to look at that base level of reality is imagine that you're walking down a town and you have the road and the sidewalk is base reality. And left and right hand side, you have houses, homes all over. Let's call those constructs universes. You see? And so when you go into that particular construct universe, it has a certain template, certain rule set based off the individual soul inside that house of the template that it lays of what it wants to experience. And so when you're truly out of here, your soul can create anything that it desires to create based off its will, desire, pleasure, love. And that's what we do. We've experienced so many things on the other side based off of what we love to do. And so this is where we are now. This one was created to experience the opposite of that.
And like you said, this is the upside down. And this is what I've been learning a little bit recently, is that as unconditional as we want to be, it's almost like the fabric is woven into, like, condition is part of this design.
The out-of-body state, man, is it's more physical than what you experience here right now in physical life. The brain could only decode a certain portion of the light spectrum. Yeah. And so we call this
0.003%, something very slivery. It's just a sliver that we've got.
you could expand this to more. The physical body can access more, but right now, majority of the population is only accessing that small portion of it. And we call this very real, very physical. But when you leave the body, you are seeing all of it again. You're accessing everything. You're accessing the potentialities of time. You're accessing thoughts. You're accessing the true state of you. And that is more real, more physical than what you would ever experience here. So, yeah. No, just when you say what that is, that's what it is. It's very physical, man. You'll be touching your soul hands and experiencing it as if it's very, very real. And then when you go back into the body, real doesn't even feel real because you could say experienced real again for the second time, born again for the second time, understanding that that is the real home, your real state. You see?
Please.
When you're having a near-death experience, it's almost as if you're on a plane to go skydiving. And you are not told that you're going to be pushed out of the plane. You're giving no briefing, no map, nothing. And then you're in the plane to skydive and you have no idea. And all of a sudden someone pushes you out and you're just free falling, panicking, freaking out. As the controlled out of body state, you are briefed. Okay, your body's going to shut down. It is going to feel like you're dying temporarily. Your soul's going to leave. This is what you're going to feel. The first things that you're probably going to see is things happening in real time. You'll see your physical body on the bed, and you'll be looking at your soul and your physical body, realizing that you have made the disconnection. Don't fear, don't panic, because you temporarily have this connection to the physical body that will start exciting the cells, pull you back in. You may also see beings. Understand, not to panic. These could be what you consider guides, or people who have been with you a very long time that you will then remember. You could access your soul records. You could see the entirety of this construct even outside of it as well. It's important because it wakes people up to their true selves again, their divinity, their home. So a lot of people are in a lot of confusion of false things, lies, deceptions that have been told to them their entire life. And there's a difference between me saying, okay, that's not necessarily true, but here's the path. This is the truth right here. And here, I'll show you. This is the difference of what truth is and what truth is not. And you could say that, but then the message isn't really ever heard. It always has pushback. So the best way to do it is show somebody, okay, I don't have to speak of it that much, but just trust me on this. Leave the body and you will see it yourself. And it will be undeniable to you that your soul, who you are, lives on forever. You will remember your true state, your divinity, your home, and you will start to bring that here. You'll start walking that path in accordance of the path that you would be walking on the other side, of doing things in integrity, doing things in love. A movement for the betterment of humanity, man, that I think people are totally unaware of still. And I think that this will create such a flame that it becomes unstoppable very, very, very soon. You know, and to me, you know, that gives me nothing but joy about it, you know, because that's sort of what the vision that I had of just, you know, here are the tools, here are the principles. Like, please just share that message of the other side, because that's what wakes people up truly and completely. It wakes them back up to their home, and it wakes them back up to who they are. The confusion stops.